Okay, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're going to be discussing what we worked on in class today, slope-intercept. On tonight's homework, we're going to ask that you determine the slope, y-intercept, and equation of a line given a graph. So that's what we're going to be working with tonight for homework. First question said, who is running faster? Explain how you know. Use math to justify your answer. Hint, determine the slope of each line below. Use the slope formula. So that's how we're going to go about this problem. We're going to go ahead and use the slope formula to determine the slope of the red line and determine the slope of the blue line. And that'll tell us who's running faster. The one with the greater slope, the higher number for their slope, is the person running faster. So let's first look at the red line. We'll take our x1, y1, which is 110, our x2, y2, which is 330, and we'll go ahead and apply the slope formula, m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You'll recall this is the exact same formula we use for rate of change, and we've been working with that for quite a bit. So all we're going to do is we're going to substitute our values in. y2 was 30. So we substitute that in, minus y1 was 10, so we substitute that in, and then x2 was 3, minus x1 was 1. So we did 30 minus 10 over 3 minus 1, 30 minus 10 is 20, 3 minus 1 is 2, 20 over 2 is 10 over 1, and now we have to interpret what that means. What does that slope mean in terms of the graph? Well, our top value was our y values. So our y values represented meters. So our top number must represent 10 meters. Our bottom values were our x values. X values are represented in seconds. So our bottom answer must relate to seconds. So 10 meters per second is what that's saying. So the meaning of slope for that red line is that that person is running 10 meters per second. They're running pretty quick. Now we're going to go ahead and look at the slope of the blue line to determine how fast that person was running. Our x1, y1 is 1.64. Our x2, y2 is 3.28. Again, we'll use our slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And then we simply substitute in. We say, okay, we said our y2 was 8 minus our y1 of 4 over our x2 of 3.2 minus our x1 of 1.6. Then we just simplify that. 8 minus 4 is 4. 3.2 minus 1.6 is 1.6. Use your calculator if you need. 4 divided by 1.6 is 2.5 over 1. We've discussed the top value, or our y values. That's represented by meters on the graph. And our x values is your time in seconds. So that person is running at 2.5 meters per second. That's the meaning of the slope of the blue line, 2.5 meters per second. So who's running faster? Definitely that red line. 10 meters per second is much faster than 2.5 meters per second. So in your answer, you're going to want to tell that the person running at 10 meters per second is the person who's running faster. I also just want to point out, I could have seen directly from the graph that the red line was the person running much faster. I can see it's a much steeper line, therefore I knew it would have a greater slope. And 10 is definitely greater than 2.5. However, on your math test or on the state test, they'll ask you to justify. And so when you need to justify mathematically, you need to show all of the work I have shown here to back up your reasoning, why you knew that red line or the person running 10 meters per second was the person running faster. Let's take a look at the next problem. For our next problem, I ask that you graph y equals 3x minus 2. Tomorrow, we're going to actually simply learn to graph from the slope-intercept form. And you remember we started talking in class today, slope-intercept form is y equals slope times x plus the y-intercept. But for now, we're going to go ahead and graph using our table. So the first x value I give you is -1. So we take our given equation, y equals 3x minus 2, and we let x be -1. That means 3 times x minus 2. So 3 times -1 minus 2. 3 times -1 is -3 minus 2 is -5. That means our first point that we'll need to plot is -1, -5. And there it is. Then we'll need to substitute 0 in place of x. So we use our given formula, and now we substitute 0 in place of x. So we do 3 times 0 minus 2. 3 times 0 is 0, minus 2 is -2. So that tells us 0, -2 is the next point that we need to plot. And there we have it. Finally, I tell you to substitute x as 1 into the equation. So 3 times 1 minus 2. 3 times 1 is 3, minus 2 is 1. So 1, 1 is our next point. And in class, we then discussed the fact that once we have our pattern of points, to make sure it goes all the way across the grid. And you'll see from your pattern of points, you go up 1, 2, 3 over 1, up 1, 2, 3 over 1, up 1, 2, 3, and then we should go over 1. So it looks like 2, 4 should be an additional point on our graph. Finally, once you have all your points plotted, you make sure you then draw your beautiful straight line through with arrows at both ends. And we always like to then label with our equation, y equals 3x minus 2. So please make sure you do that. One of the questions that is asked on the homework here is, what is the y-intercept? Well, once you have an equation graphed, it's very easy to see that the y-intercept is b equals -2. We could also talk about the coordinates of that point if you want, and the coordinates of that point are 0, -2. So your y-intercept is -2, and you can pull that right off the graph. Hopefully you notice you can also pull that right off of the equation. This right here gives your y-intercept. This on your graph gives your y-intercept. It's just the spot where it crosses the y-axis. Now let's talk about finding the slope of that line. To find the slope of that line, we can use our slope formula. We have some points. So we could use our y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I think I'll use my x2, y2, I'm going to call 0, 2. And my x1, y1, I'm going to call -1, -5. So you'll see y2 minus y1 is -2 minus a -5. And your x2 minus x1 is 0 minus a -1. Well, -2 minus a -5 minus a negative, we know, becomes plus a positive. 0 minus a -1 minus a negative becomes plus a positive. -2 plus 5. Numerator will be 3, 0 plus 1, the denominator will be 1. So 3 over 1 is your slope, or you can just name that as 3. So what's the slope of that line? The slope of that line is 3. And always you're going to begin to get very comfortable noticing if it's in slope-intercept form, where y's alone equals something times x, and then plus or minus a constant, the number in front of x, as long as you have y isolated by itself on one side, the number in front of x will be your slope. And we discussed before break, that's also called your rate of change. I think it's important to notice on the graph, once we plot 0, -2, and we know our slope is 3, 3 is the same as 3 over 1. So once you plot that y-intercept of 0, -2, you go up 1, 2, 3 to the right 1. Plot your point. Up 1, 2, 3 to the right 1. Plot your point. That is using your slope. That slope gives away the pattern of points. If we're going up 3 and to the right 1, we could also choose to go down 1, 2, 3 and to the left 1. And there you have it. There is the slope and the y-intercept and the graph for y equals 3x minus 2. Try to have a good night. We will see you tomorrow. Take care.